All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today, this lesson just comes from the inspiration of, seeing videos that other brothers have been putting up, man, concerning, what's going on, just in the month of March alone here in 2026, man. And it has not been a dull moment yet, man. Since January 1st of 2026, even though we know that January 1st is not the new year, the new year actually starts in the spring, but January 1st of 2026, it's been turned up, man. A lot of things have been taking place and a lot of things are going to continue to take place, man. And as starting with our apostles on down, man, and even myself, we've been saying that 2026 was going to be a hell of a year, man. And we can see it, with the things that are taking place. So I'm just going to entitle this lesson, The New World Order is Here, and indeed it is, man. Because this really, even though really the New World Order really started, a while ago, but now we're really starting to see it, coming to fruition, man. We're in the beginning stages of this dystopian future that the elites want to bring forth, which they won't, accomplish 100%. But this is what they want to do. They want complete control over the entire planet Earth and over every single, person here. So I'm just going to bring out a few scriptures and a little bit of information. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And I'm going to start with the book of Jeremiah, chapter 30 and verse 5. And it says, "For thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear and not of peace." And right, man, that voice of trembling, because again, we've been warning the people. When I say we, the men of the Lord, Lord willing, will be of the elect, but starting with the apostles and elders of Great Millstone on down, all the like-minded men, we've been warning you collectively about, the coming collapse of the American economy. And we're seeing that along with this war that is taking place between the U.S. and Israel, going against Iran, and since this war started, it's going on, about 3 weeks now, that this war has been going on. And what has happened since then? Fuel costs has increased, man. We've been telling you, because again, we're not out here telling you that everything is going to be all right. No, man, we're telling you that things are going to get worse. And you can see it, right? Because things are getting turned up. Verse 6, it says, "Ask ye now, and see whether a man does travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. And clearly men don't give birth." But what? Jeremiah is giving the analogy that that's how men are going to be in this particular time, because that's how afraid they're going to be. They're going to be like women, about to give birth. Because what do women have, once they're in their 9th month, getting ready to deliver their child? They have birth pains, contractions. And that's what's being compared to, men being afraid, man. They're going to be so afraid that they're going to hold their stomachs, man. They're not going to know what to do. The men of the Lord, they're going to be fine. But the average man here in America, no matter the nationality, he's not going to know what to do, in that time. Verse 7, "Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even a time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it." And right, man, we're in the time of Jacob's trouble, and things are going to increase more and more. We're in that time. It's inevitable, because this is, the time that we've been waiting for, to come upon the planet Earth, the time of Jacob's trouble, because 2026 could possibly be the year where all hell is finally going to break loose and Jacob's trouble is going to be, in full force. Because again, it says that Jacob's trouble is going to be like a time of no other, man. So no other time in history where, fearful things have happened upon the planet Earth is going to compare to this time, man. It's going to be the worst time upon the planet Earth, right? But what did it say at the latter part of the verse? He should be saved out of it. And who's the he? The elect. They're going to be delivered from the said perils that are coming upon this planet, man. Primarily here in America. So let me grab that to back it up in the book of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And as you can see, the subtitle reads, the time of the end, because that's the time that we're in. We're in the last days, the last of the last days, as I personally like to say, because again, the prophecies are speaking, man. More and more prophecies are coming to pass. So this is the book of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1, and it says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as was never since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that should be found written in the book. And again, this is, Daniel just reiterating the same thing that Jeremiah said, that this is going to be the worst time upon the planet Earth. And it's going to be so bad that Michael the Archangel is going to have to step in on our behalf to help us, man, because we're going to need help, from on high, divine intervention, if you will, because there is nothing that we can carnally do to prepare for what's about to take place on the earth, especially here in Babylon, man. It's about to get crazy, and we can only, talk about it for so long and speculate, how bad it's going to be until we're actually in it, man. But it's going to be a horrible time upon the earth, man. We're going to see a lot of death take place. A lot of people are going to be judged in these last days, and we're just hoping that we have, the Ezekiel 9:4, the mark of exemption, the Thawa, while everyone else is going to be slayed out here, man. Which, since I mentioned it, I'll actually grab it. It's the book of Ezekiel, chapter 9, and verse 4, and it says, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And that's what we're doing. We're sighing and crying. Now, obviously, we're not actually, shedding literal tears, but we're crying out, man, for the abominations that are being done, man. Homosexuality is, at an all-time high. Sexual immorality, our oppressors ruling over us, man. The different nations, benefiting off of us being in a lower state, man. Just different things. We're crying out to the Lord because we need to be saved, But during that time, that's how you're going to know who the Lord is and isn't dealing with, because they're going to have that mark of exemption. Now, this is a spiritual mark. This is different from the mark that is spoken of in Revelation, the 13th chapter. That is a physical mark that is going to go on the people. Ezekiel 9:4 is a spiritual mark, the Thawa. So while the men of the Lord are protected, what? In verse 5, it says, and to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, and neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark. And began in my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And right, man, people are going to be judged. This primarily applies to our people, but even these other nations, man, that are here, they're going to be catching judgment too. But what? The men of the Lord, they're going to be fine while everyone else is suffering. And then that clip that I featured, that man was going into how, possibly in the spring, we'll just see. I'm not just going to take what he says for face value. But again, it very well may look like that, that things could possibly get crazy, in April, so anywhere between April and June, we'll see. But as you can see, next month, they've raised the draft age from 18 to 26. They raised it to like 34. Now it's like 42 or something like that, you know. So again, a draft is coming. So a lot of men are going to be drafted to go and fight, during World War III because they're trying to get more numbers. They're trying to get more men to go over there and fight this war in Iran. But what? Nobody wants to fight because they know that this is a senseless war, But a lot of you are still going to go and fight anyway. They're going to draft you. They're going to, snatch you up just like they did over there in the Ukraine. And they're riding around, finding random men, snatching them up, and throwing them in a war, man. And that very same thing is going to take place here in Babylon. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but they're going to round a lot of you men up and even some of you women to go and fight this war. It's the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51 and verse 30. It says, the mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holds. It's like if their might hath failed. They became as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. And right, the mighty men of Babylon, primarily the Edomite man, but, just the men here in America in general, that they don't want to fight, man. They don't want to go to war. They are like, the men of previous generations, like the men that fought during World War I, World War II, Vietnam. Excuse me, during those various wars, men actually wanted to go and fight, now what? They don't, because they can see that, again, that they would be fighting on behalf of the imposters over there in the land, because that's their war. They started a war, B.B. Milkowski, which again is, is still up in the air on whether or not this man is alive or not, we'll see. But he started this war and blamed it on America. What should that tell you? Just like it says, in Jeremiah 49, that the least of the flock is going to draw them out, because the small hats have started this war. Now things are going to continue to escalate, World War III is heating up. Now, obviously, again, it's not going to happen until, the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, where it speaks of the mark of the beast, verse 16 to 18, which the mark of the beast is the RFID microchip. This war will not come to pass until that prophecy comes to pass first. The prophecies have to happen in their particular order, and the next prophecy that is coming is the mark of the beast, which we're still looking for, So I just want to grab this little bit of info, right? Because he talked about how basically the American economy is going to collapse. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So right before this, I started up this video, just came to my mind, I asked chat, how will increased fuel costs affect the American economy, right? So it says, rising fuel costs ripple through the American economy in several connected ways, affecting consumers, businesses, inflation, and even government policy. Here's a clear breakdown of what typically happens. So what? It says, number one, higher everyday costs for consumers. When gasoline and diesel fuel prices rise, households feel it almost immediately. And I can honestly say I feel it, man. Because until, this shit finally goes down, I'm not going to stop talking about how the gas prices are going up, because it seems like every week the gas prices increase. So it says more expensive commuting and travel. Higher delivery costs pass on to groceries and online shopping. Less disposable income for non-essentials. Result, consumer spending slows, which can weaken economic growth. Says increased business expenses. Fuel is a major input cost for many industries. Transportation, trucking, airlines, shipping, agriculture, fuel for machinery and transport, manufacturing, energy intensive production. Businesses often respond by raising prices, cutting costs, including hiring or wages. Result, profit margins shrink or prices rise, and that's what's going to happen. Prices are going to rise. It says inflation pressure. Fuel is a key component of inflation because it affects nearly everything. Higher transportation costs increase prices across supply chains. Energy prices directly raise utility bills. So again, you know, electricity, gas, water bills, it's all, all of these utilities are going to go up, because of, the increased fuel costs. Says this contributes to broader inflation tracked by measures like the Consumer Price Index. Result, overall price levels increase, reducing purchasing power. Because again, he mentioned that the US dollar is weak. Why? Because it's not backed by anything. Therefore, the value of the US dollar, goes down day by day. Says Federal Reserve response. If inflation rises too much, the Federal Reserve may raise interest rates, tighten monetary policy. Says the result, borrowing becomes more expensive, loans, mortgages, credit cards, slower investment and economic growth. Supply chain effects, higher diesel prices especially impact logistics. Trucking costs rise. Key for U.S. goods movements, and this is one of the most important things, the supply chain, says shipping delays or reduced efficiency. Result, goods become more expensive and sometimes less available. So right, man, with these rising fuel costs, which I've made mention of at camp this past Saturday, that if these truckers can afford to get diesel fuel, which diesel fuel is more expensive than regular gasoline, then less and less products are going to be brought to the store. So that means, less food is going to be available at these grocery stores, or whatever other, essentials that these trucks bring, across the country, is going to be less and less available. Why? Because the truckers don't have the money to, fill up their trucks, So the next one, it says energy sector gains, partial offset. Not all effects are negative. It says U.S. oil and gas companies may profit more. Increased domestic product can boost jobs in energy regions. Result, localized economic benefits, especially in energy producing states. Trade and global impact. The U.S. both produces and consumes large amounts of oil. Higher global oil prices can worsen trade balances if imports rise. Geopolitical tensions often amplify fuel price spikes. Result, greater economic uncertainty and market volatility. So it says, bigger picture. Increased fuel costs usually slow economic growth, increase inflation, reduce consumer spending, but the severity depends on how long prices stay high, wage growth, government, and central bank responses. So, right, and as you can see, if we wanted to give the effects of here in Michigan, which I didn't go that far, but it broke down exactly how increased fuel costs is affecting the American economy, and there was not a single lie told. That's how it's going to affect the economy. Everything here in America that, yeah, man, people just don't understand how important fuel is for the American economy right now. And I just seen a video earlier, on Instagram where you had over there in India, a bunch of Elamites, flooding this particular gas station because they're feeling the effects of increased fuel costs as well. So this war is not a light thing, man. It's not a light thing at all, because it just goes to show you that this place is being affected heavily by what's going on. So coming back to Jeremiah 51, I'm going to get verse 7. Slakia. Jeremiah 51:7. It says, Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, and that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. And indeed the other nations are mad at this place. The different things that America has pushed throughout the world, the philosophies, the doctrines, hell, even the money. This is why you have nations like the BRICS nations that have stepped away from the US dollar. Why? Because it's not backed by anything, man. They're just debt notes. So these different nations are mad at America, Verse 8 says, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for her? Take balm for her pain, and so she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go every one into his own country, for her judgment reacheth unto heaven, and is lifted up even to the skies. And right, this place is not healed, man. There is no healing this place. The fall of America is inevitable, and it's going to be the greatest downfall of any nation/kingdom in history, man. Because what we're approaching, the 250th anniversary of America being established in July, So July 4th, 2026 will mark, 250 years. And again, man, they say the average lifespan of a kingdom is about that 250 years, man. We'll see what happens. But we do know that, again, it's over for this place. So all you people that still have hope here in America, that have hope for this place, I should say, you are sadly mistaken. Because it just told you in these verses 8 and 9, that there is no healing this place. It doesn't matter what they do, It's prophecy that this place is going to fall just like ancient Egypt fell. How ancient Egypt was plagued, America is going to be plagued in that very same fashion. But the only difference is America is going to be burned up at the end of it, So let's get the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, and verse 3. It says, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets, when the sound of grinding is like you. When the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. And right, and what is that talking about? Job loss, which, you heard the individual in the video, he said, last year, 3 million people lost their jobs. But how many more people are going to lose their jobs this year? Which ultimately, once this society fully collapses, then everyone is going to be out of a job, man. Which I said it before, I say it again, man. I look forward to the day that I don't have to go to work anymore. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but at least I don't have to be disturbed by my alarm clock again, But that's what that's talking about, because again, man, the American economy is going to collapse and everyone is going to suffer job loss, which, the men of the Lord, we don't give a damn, because again, we're going to put our trust and hope in Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, that, they're going to keep us safe in that day, and be with us. So just real quick, grab a couple Scriptures out of 2nd Esdras chapter 15. This is 2nd Esdras 15, and I actually grabbed 10. The point is 11. But 2nd Esdras 15:10 says, Behold, my people is led as a flock to the slaughter. I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt. Because again, the Lord is going to deliver the elect out of this place. Verse 11, But I will bring them with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, and smite Egypt with plagues as before. So right, this is not talking about ancient Egypt, because it says what? Smite Egypt with plagues as before, because we know how ancient Egypt was plagued. Those 10 plagues that were sent to confound the 10 gods, of Egypt. What? America is going to suffer those same plagues, just like how ancient Egypt went down. Says, and will destroy all of the land thereof. Right, man. America is going to be plagued, and this entire landmass is going to be destroyed. And get verse 12 as well. It says, Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and punishment that Yahweh shall bring upon it. And right, man, this place is mourning. You hear the people complaining, about, food, the price of food going up, the cost of living going up. Now you see fuel prices, it's hard for people out here, so everyone is ready to crash out at this point. So I'm going to jump to verse 14. It says, Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Which, I broke this particular verse down, where Bishop Nathaniel got it wrong. He's saying that verse 16 in particular is talking about the war, that's going on over there in the east between, Israel and the U.S., coming up against Iran. No, that's talking about the time of Jacob's trouble, because it says what in verse 15 that, one people is going to fight against another people. So there's going to be race wars, class wars, the different nations that are over here are going to be, everyone is going to go into their own people and fight against another people. That's what's going to take place. And just like it says, what? People are going to invade one another. So we're coming into that time where everything is getting more expensive. So therefore, these doomsday preppers, that are putting it out there that they have this and this, stored up, people are going to come see them, or even people that used to be neighbors, if they're going to come see you if they know that you have, a little bit of food or whatever. We're coming into some very, very serious times right now, man. And what it says, the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So these people aren't going to give a damn what these different, people that are in these positions of authority have to say. The mayor, the governor, these senators, the president himself. They're not going to care, because the people are going to be in survival mode. They're going to be desperate. So therefore, they're not going to give a damn what anyone has to say. In verse 17, it says, a man shall desire to go into a city and should not be able. And as of, this past Monday, you had what? President Trump, send ICE agents to the airports. And already, videos have came out that, the Northern Kingdom women, yet again, Northern Kingdom is still feeling it, being arrested, and eventually it's not just going to be at the airport. It's going to be, at the train stations, the bus stations, and military checkpoints at, these various cities. So this is what verse 17 is talking about, martial law. We're in a police state now, because it's not normal where you have these agents, at the airports, and they're not there to help the TSA. No, man. They're there to round up anyone, primarily Israelites, man. Israelites. You see they're still coming after the Northern Kingdom, and eventually it's going to be Southern Kingdom, getting rounded up as well and deported too. These, not even deported, being hauled off to these concentration camps. You know, excuse me, Slakia. Verse 18, it says, "For because of their pride, the houses shall be troubled." Slakia, for because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. And what did Jeremiah say? Men are going to be afraid. And why are men going to be afraid? Because again, it's going to be an extremely fearful time upon the planet Earth, that we're about to experience primarily here in America. The entire world is going to be going through their particular trials and tribulations, but it's going to be a horrible time here, you know. So men are going to be afraid. And if men are going to be afraid, how much more the women? You women, you're going to have, man, oh man, you women out here that aren't of the elect, the elect lady, like it says, in the scriptures, you women that are slated to be saved, yeah, y'all about to catch it, man. Y'all about to catch some serious judgment out here. And a lot of you are going to be ravished, and that's just the reality of it. You're going to get it. Verse 19 says, "A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation." And right, man, this is what the people are going to do. They're going to invade one another. They're going to take whatever food they have. It's plenty of videos that are coming out, man. We're here. We're here. Nothing is going to stop what's about to take place on the earth, man. Things have to get worse before they can get better. But again, this is the time that we're in, man. So I'm just going to grab a couple more scriptures and that'll be it, man. But I'm going to jump to 2nd Esdras chapter 16. I'm going to get verse 17. And it says, woe is me, who will deliver me in those days? And Esdras, he saw himself, or as he's seen his vision. Excuse me, it's like as he's seen his vision, he knew that he would be back again to go through this particular time, because again, reincarnation is real, and this is what he's asking, who's going to be with me in those days? And obviously, the Lord is going to be with Esdras, in this current time that we're in. Who he is and where he is, we don't know, but Esdras is back, in his lot, as a prophet. Verse 18, the beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the power shall stand in fear, the beginning of evils. What shall I do when these evils shall come? And right, man, these are the beginning stages of what's about to take place on the earth, primarily here in Babylon. Esdras knows that he was going to have to go through this. We're all going to have to go through this, and we just pray that, again, we're of the elect, man. I pray myself that I am of the elect, man, that the Lord is with me, that the Lord will be with me during these tough times that we're approaching, man. Because things are only going to get more and more difficult. I'm going to get verse 19. It says, behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. And right, man, these are all punishments that are sent upon the earth. Famine, plague, tribulation, anguish, all of these things, man, sent as scourges, as it says, man. These are the different punishments that people are going to have to, get. And what's the main thing that it mentions frequently just in this chapter alone? Famine. A lot of people are going to die of the famine, and with these fuel prices increasing, it's just going to add to it. That's why, again, Champ broke it down how, increased fuel cost is going to affect the American economy, and it's not good. If things continue the way they are, then again, we just have to expect it, any day that all hell can break loose. That man, he made some very valid points, but at the same time, we'll just wait and see when exactly this thing is going to take place, because we know that the American dollar is weak, it's going down, the price of silver and gold is up and down, you know, and just, we're here. The New World Order is here, you know. So I'm just going to end it right there. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say Shalom.